Okay, mass is a measurement of what you are, and it never changes. Weight is a measurement of the effect of gravity on mass. So on Earth, since we're all pretty much affected by the same gravitational pull, we often refer to weight as mass and vice versa. On the New York State math test, they don't really distinguish between weight and mass. So even though some distinction is very important, and the difference between the two is important, on the New York State math test, please try to think of mass and weight as being not different, unless they make some kind of new problem where they are. So usually when they refer to mass, they're also talking about weighing a mass. Because when you weigh a mass, you're really accounting for how much the gravity is affecting your matter makeup. Okay, that being said, the difference between weight and mass. Let's just look at different types of masses. So, and it says right here, and this is correct, that the basic unit of measurement is the gram. Why? Because, well, it turns out that many things that we handle on a day-to-day basis, from cups to chairs to shoes to things we hold like forks and pennies and dollars and wallets and whatever, are easily measured with grams. And then from there, we have all these other different types of measurements. We're going to focus on grams, kilograms, and then milligrams. Alright, so a kilogram is equal, if you take 1 kilogram, what you have is 1,000 grams. So kilograms are great for heavier things. Milligrams are the exact opposite. They are 1/1000th of a gram. So remember where that is. You could write it as a fraction, but it's usually written as a decimal. Here's tenths, hundredths, and thousandths. So for every 1 milligram you have 0.001 of a gram. And then if we reverse that, if you have a gram, the question could be, how many milligrams do you have? This is different in that you would have 1,000 milligrams. To keep track of all these conversions, I try to just think of an order chart, like what's bigger and smaller. So I have kilo is bigger than gram is bigger than milli. You can write milligram, and in fact, let me abbreviate kilo as kilogram. That would make more sense. So this helps me keep track. So if grams are bigger than milligrams, if I have 1 large gram, that would be made up of 1,000 really small milligrams. Whereas if I had 1 gram, that would mean, well, grams are less than kilograms. So I would have 1/1000th of a kilogram. And the reverse, if I had 1 kilogram, this is the largest, how many grams would I have? I would have 1,000 grams. And if I had 1 milligram, that's a lot smaller than a gram, so it's 1/1000th of a gram. And we can make all kinds of conversions here. Like, let's say if we had 30 grams, what would we do? Well, let's refer back to our original ratio, which is that for every 1 gram, right, we have 0.001 kilograms. Be careful here. Don't write 1 gram for every 1,000 kilograms. It's very easy to slip up and do that, but think about what this would be saying. If kilograms measure more than grams, would it make sense that 1 small gram equals 1,000 kilograms? It doesn't make sense, because that would have to mean that kilograms are smaller, and we know they're not. So we have 30 grams. How many kilograms do we have? Take this ratio and multiply both parts by 30. So instead of 0.001 kilograms, we have this number times 30, which would give us 0.03 kilograms. And here, if we have 30,500 grams, well, if 1 gram is equal to this many kilograms, well, now we're multiplying the grams by 30,500. So we take this number and multiply by 30,500. However, I'm going to even simplify it. For every 1,000 grams, to help me think about it, I have 1 kilogram. So if I have 30,000 grams, I also have 30 kilograms. But since I have 500 as well, that's 1/2 of a kilogram. There are other kinds of conversions. If we have 2.5 kilograms, how many grams do we have? Keep in mind that kilograms are bigger than grams. So what does that mean? It would take more grams to make a kilogram. So whatever number I have here, it should be larger than 2.5. And that'll help me keep track of this. 1 kilogram is a really, really large amount of grams. So if I have 2.5 kilograms, that means I have 2.5 times more grams, or 2,500 grams, which is our answer, and that makes sense. Again, this number is larger than this number, which is what we should get because it takes more grams to make a kilogram. Here we have 0.25 kilograms. Well, let's go back to this ratio right here. Instead of 1 kilogram, we have 1/4 of that, so we should also have 1/4 of the grams. So we have 250 grams. Often what happens is we get questions like this. What's the best method to determine the mass of a penny? And I think what throws people off is this idea that weight is not mass. So we automatically have a tendency to just reject these two. Oh, I know weight is not mass, but be careful. Again, I think it is their fault when they write this question. It's very easy to confuse us. It's very easy to be misled, where they're talking about weight and mass in the same sentence. However, read it through. The mass of a penny, it is realistic to weigh the penny on a scale to the nearest gram. Okay, that seems to make sense, but keep going. Weigh the penny on a scale to the nearest kilogram. Perhaps what they're hoping you'll do is think somehow kilo is smaller and that pennies are small, so we'll use this measurement, but that doesn't make sense because why would you bother measuring something so light with such a large measurement? Kilograms are for heavier objects. Every kilogram equals 1,000 grams. And look at these two choices. I believe you could tell they won't work right away because we don't really measure mass. What we do is we weigh mass, even though weight and mass are different. What they're showing us here is to measure the diameter multiplied by pi, that would find the circumference. And to measure the radius with the ruler, square the result multiplied by pi, that would find the area of the penny. Perhaps they're hoping you'll think a penny is round, so it has to deal with pi somehow. They're trying to trick you. Those two choices are out. So think about the reasonableness of this answer. Weighing a penny on a scale with a gram makes more sense than any of the other options. And if they ask you another question, grams are for, I would say, average objects. That's not a very good descriptive term, but what I'm saying is stuff that you would encounter on a day-to-day basis that you can pretty much carry. Not things that are too heavy to carry. Kilograms are for heavier objects. Cars, all types of stuff. Milligrams are for really light objects. So that's the basic idea.